Go.
Attorney Bruce Fein, you are the international spokesperson and the lawyer of MALAMI, the leader of the indigenous people of Bali. You came all the way from the States. What brought you here today?
Well, today I filed a criminal complaint against two high-level officials implicated in what I call the judicial murder of NYAKO, who's been detained for over 9 months without a trial in Abuja, Nigeria. And the criminal charges accuse the Attorney General, MALAMI, High Court Justice NYAKO, and co-conspirators President Muhammadu Buhari of Nigeria and President Kenyatta of Kenya, conspiring not only to judicially murder NYAKO after his kidnapping, torture, and extraordinary rendition from Nairobi, Kenya, but attempting to, as part of an overall larger vicious conception of destroying the Biafran people as a whole throughout the southeast. And the judicial murder is simply one element of this larger conspiracy through starvation, depriving of ability to earn livelihood, rape, killings, maimings, plunder in southeast Nigeria that has persisted for years. Basically, what you might call this is genocide on the installment plan. I don't mean to use that in a light fashion, but it clearly falls within the definition of genocide, and surely crimes against humanity as defined in the International Criminal Court statute called the Rome Statute. So that is why I am here in The Hague, April 7th, 2022, to see that justice is done, and we actually obtain a dispensation in Nigeria that responds to the universal principle of self-determination of peoples. They aren't forced into sovereignties that they never chose, and the only reason why the Biafrans are living under a Fulani yoke in Nigeria is because British used machine guns over 100 years ago to draw artificial boundaries.
How do you think MALAMI or NYAKO will react to the case you brought today to the ICC, and especially how do you think the case will
Well, I believe if Mr. MALAMI and Ms. NYAKO are sensible, this should cause them concern for a couple of reasons. First of all, the crimes within the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court have no statutes of limitations. They can be brought for the life of the accused. So they don't have any time frame in which they can feel themselves safe. Secondly, they need to remember that they are pawns of Nigerian President Buhari. He's leaving office next year at a minimum, term limits. So they will lose the protection he may offer to try to thwart the investigations, the interviews in the southeast, to provide admissible evidence in a criminal prosecution to obtain convictions. That is, these two individuals are expendable pawns on a chessboard. And they need to think hard and long whether they want to remain in that precarious position when they could end up in prison for life.
And how soon do you expect the reaction from the ICC prosecutor from Karim Khan? And how would you characterize the justice at the end of the day in the case, in the eventual case, this goes to court?
Those are difficult questions to answer with precision for several reasons. First of all, once you file criminal charges, because the ICC doesn't want to give clues to the accused as to how they may hurt witnesses, destroy evidence, they investigate in secret. They don't put a publicity sign out, we've talked to XYZ. They know those persons who shared that information will be targets of retaliation. And it's very difficult to know how quickly the ICC will work. Remember, it has more than just my complaint. As you well know, there's recently been a complaint filed against Russian President Vladimir Putin for crimes against humanity, war crimes in Ukraine. And I want to be candid. The ICC is a political body. It's an arm of the United Nations. And given all the publicity that saturates the international media in those nations that have power, given to the Ukrainian situation, I'm sure it's a #1 priority. So that's what has to be understood by our audience, is that we aren't the only case, and we don't know whether there's could be another case if China invades Taiwan. All sorts of things could happen that could bring cases and slow down the process. Obviously, we want to push forward as quickly as possible, and we'll continue to supplement the information that's already been provided to enable them to move with dispatch. But I would hope that this should send a signal, psychological signal, that the Nigerian Fulani orchestrated government has crossed the line. You're now into the realm of crimes against humanity and genocide, and it's not a free fire zone for you anymore. And you're going to be held accountable. It's not if, but when. And we will not stop using every peaceful judicial justice avenue of redress to make sure these crimes are held accountable as they should. I am very confident that if Nnamdi Kanu is released, it would propel an effort to try to negotiate some kind of peaceful, if you will, transition from the current British-imposed, artificial, unitary government into a government that has genuine sovereignty based upon self-determination for Biafrans, for other ethnic groups, the Yoruba or otherwise. All of them were forced at the head of a British machine gun 100 years ago into these artificial boundaries. And I think given, one, the vision of Nnamdi Kanu, his enthusiastic support by the Biafrans, and the fact that he's not a vengeful person, would be a jumpstart of the process towards a peaceful devolution. And it certainly can be done. We have a recent instance in Africa, South Sudan seceded from Sudan in a referendum organized by the United Nations in 2011. So this is not unprecedented. And in fact, there are all sorts of what we call slippery slope scenarios. Oh, if there's one secession, if you call it that, I don't really call it secession, it's actually self-determination, then all of the African boundaries will come unraveled and the whole country of continent will turn into anarchy. That's not true. It didn't happen after South Sudan held a referendum. It didn't happen after Eritrea separated from Ethiopia. Every case is unique. So this idea that, no, we all have to stand together because all of Africa would be combustible if any part of it was able to achieve self-determination is nonsense. And that has to be gotten over.
What outcome do you expect from that, given the fact that the case has been adjourned multiple times for no sensible reason on the federal government?
Yeah. So what is likely to happen to April 8th, I believe, based one on examining this so-called 15 amended count charge, is that the government does not have any evidence to prove guilt, and they will make some kind of motion or delaying tactic to what you might call push the case off once again. We can think already over 9 months have elapsed with a government that's overflowing with money, even if they steal most of it from oil. And they're even richer now because the crisis in Ukraine has caused the price of oil to jump up, I don't know, up to over $100 a barrel. They have limitless resources, and they have 9 months and have not introduced a crumb of evidence of guilt because there's none there. And one example, it is repeatedly said in the charges against Nnamdi Kanu that they consist of broadcasts from UK London on Radio Biafra and these broadcasts allegedly incited violence, incited harm to various Nigerian officials, burning down public facilities in Lagos. None of it is actually shown to happen. But you would figure that the charge, they must have a transcript. You're journalists, okay? You take transcripts. And that's how you understand whether something is defamatory or whole host of things. Well, despite the fact that they have these allegations, they can't even identify the day or the month or the year in which the broadcast was made. So you're claiming a particular broadcast was an incitement to violence, and you listen to it and you don't know the day, you don't know the month, you don't know the year. That's an indication you just made it up. So I believe the government has no evidence, they can't go forward, and therefore there'll be some excuse to defer it even further. And I believe also there's a political motivation for this as well. President Buhari doesn't really know how to deal with it. He's up to his elbows in crimes himself in the extraordinary rendition of kidnapping. And so they said, well, listen, I have to leave office next year. We'll just leave this mess to our successors and we're out of here. Which is a further incentive for them to just do nothing. Because there's nothing that they can do other than embarrass themselves by showing they have no incriminating evidence.
Could you share some perspectives, some comparisons on the realities
Well, I mean, a glib way to describe it is it's just an example of what you might call the racism of the West. Ukrainians are Europeans, they're white by and large, Orthodox Christians by and large, and therefore the media attention is much greater. There's more sympathy in accepting Ukrainian refugees than, say, the refugees flowing across the Mediterranean from Libya, and they're Muslim and oftentimes black, and therefore it is an example of culturally biased. The media and the international community have power towards more Christian European white individuals than they are towards Africans. And there's certainly, I think, some truth of that. But I think that's overstated as well. Part of it is simply that in Ukraine, it's much more accessible than some of the Southeast is. The fact is that reporters can go into Ukraine like you if you want to be a witness in Kiev. You can't do that in Nigeria because Nigeria won't let you go to the Southeast unless you want to risk your life and want to go to the And also, the media facilities, the ability to get information is much easier in Ukraine than it is in Nigeria because the electricity goes off every other hour, the internet access is very uneven, and so it's just more difficult. But I don't want to say that's exclusively the differentiation. I do think that there remains a racist element. I think that's, for good or ill, that's unfortunate. That by and large, international community operates on power, and the countries that have the power can favor their own. What are you going to do about it? You can complain and point out the double standards, but you know what? Double standards has been around since the Old Testament, and there happen to be a chosen people. And new chosen people come along every few generations, and whoever the new chosen people are, the old chosen people get oppressed. And I think that's an example here. So I'd say I don't want at all try to dissuade people from seeing the double standards, but that's just a fact of life, and I don't see it changing.
And just the last question to finish this interview. What is the population of the Biafrans worldwide, and how soon do you expect a rank of those?
Well, Nigeria has not actually itself conducted a serious census, even internally. For years, they don't want to make counts because it feels it may have to change the distribution of states and political power. So we're making just projections, recognizing that there's an element of inexactitude, if you will, here. And I think the best projections are anywhere from 80 to 100 million Biafrans worldwide, which is certainly larger than the populations of most countries in the world, including Spain, from you come from, or the Netherlands, where we're sitting at present. So there's certainly no lack of population to create a Biafran sovereignty. Now, how long will it take, to obtain a referendum on sovereignty? Again, because there are international forces that are going to determine this, since it's not very unlikely that the Fulani government on its own is going to offer a referendum. So many things can be flukish. I mean, the South Sudanese referendum didn't come for decades. In some sense, I think it's fair to say that the current agitation or sponsorship of a referendum and having a separate sovereignty it's really a continuation of the 67-70 Biafran Civil War, which means it's been ongoing for 40 years, 50 years or more. But I think with consistent support from Biafrans and advocacy, we can get a referendum, I think a sovereignty referendum, and convince the international community, and maybe and I'm talking about a range of 5 years or so. But again, oftentimes it's very flukish. One of the things we need to recognize is that a big determinant is the views of the 5 big veto members of the Security Council of the United Nations, which is Russia, China, France, UK, and the United States. And if they're working all in harmony behind this, it can happen tomorrow. But if they're at loggerheads, and right now certainly Russia and China are kind of pitted against Great Britain, France, and the US, they ought to have unilateral veto power. They have the ability to slow things down. And we don't know what could change, China, Russia, UK, France, US, that could cause them to become more in alignment than being adversaries, enemies, as they are at present over Ukraine. But if that happens, it can happen very quickly. But it's the resolve that's very, very important. And it may well be that the Nigerians, and I would hope in the next election, will recognize that it's not healthy for anybody to have this constant unrest, constant resistance, constant uncertainty. It impoverishes everybody. And we're all going to be better off if we're able to negotiate a sensible, what I call self-determination solution to the artificial Nigeria entity.